You're really going to enjoy this conversation today with Clark Aldrich. Coach, I learned a lot about Socratic questions and the power of being a good question asker as a leader.
That's a great point. Clark also is really trying to enhance education, so he has some really good insights as educators how we can improve the schools or educational system.
This is the Limitless Leadership Lounge, where Coach and John learn along with you from some of the world's most decorated leaders. Recently promoted, let's sharpen the saw together.
We're really excited to welcome our next guest to the Limitless Leadership Lounge. He was introduced by a former guest, Jake Stahl, that's been on twice, and they do some work together. His name is Clark Aldrich. Clark is a graduate of Brown University. He works in e-learning, training, and development arenas. He's the father of simulation learning, the award-winning writer of Short Sims and Unschooling Rules, and recently created an amazing leadership tool called the Socratic Cards, which we're going to delve into pretty quickly. He is also recognized by Forbes Magazine and CNN as one of the world's leading voices on experiential learning. Without further ado, Clark Aldrich, welcome to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure and honor to be here.
All right, I have my Socratic cards. Let's delve in. Tell us a little bit about the genesis and how you help leaders with the Socratic cards.
Sure. So I've always been rather frustrated with the traditional learning model, the classroom model, the lectures and tests and workbooks model. And so I've spent my career looking at alternatives, looking at how other people do training and education when they care the most. And one thing I learned early on is if a group cares the most about training, if they're really passionate, say airplane trainers or nuclear power trainers or whatever, what do they use? They use simulations. And when people care the most about actually changing people's behaviors, they use simulations. So I spent a lot of time building really complicated simulations, building really simple simulations and stuff. But then I made a shift recently and I stopped looking at how does the best training happen? And I started looking at how do the best people learn? How do the people, because for other reasons, I spent a long time talking to CEOs. My first job was working with the CEO and his team at Xerox, neighbor of yours. And I talked to a lot of CEOs, a lot of CIOs about their job. And so one of the observations, which I think we all make pretty comfortably, is they all learn differently. Their process of learning is not going to a classroom, they definitely read books all the time, but it's a different mentality. And so I think probably my biggest question was saying, can I create a replication of that model? Can I create something that you can hold in your hands that is a model of how the most accomplished people learn? And that was what turned into Socratic Cards.
Excellent. I got to delve in. If you were to work with a young leader, because I did peruse through some of the questions and they're very powerful, but is there one or two that you would like to share that you think would be really helpful for a young and emerging leader to delve into?
I think the meta answer to that question is good leaders have good information, but great leaders ask great questions. And
Yeah.
so as you are thinking about becoming or already are in the position of leadership, then probably the biggest question to you is my biggest suggestion to you is get really good at asking questions and asking really good questions and asking questions to which you don't know the answer. So one kind of a Socratic question is oh, I have the real answer and I'm trying to draw it out of you. But I think a more profound Socratic question is there is no pithy answer to. And let me give a couple of things. So one thing is for a new leader, is there such thing as a bad customer? And now we can talk about that. And there's lots of reasons to say yes and lots of reasons to say no, but it has implications. And if you're a young leader, you may want to start off your staff meeting or you start off your gathering with that kind of question. Another perhaps bigger one, which you might ask at an interview as you're interviewing new people, is does your life calling change over time and how? What is the mechanism by which your life calling changes, if you think it does?
Excellent.
So we're getting deeper here, it sounds, as
Yeah,
leaders.
absolutely. These are all super deep questions and super profound ones. Another one, which I think I ask people more often than the other ones, is you're applying for a dream job. Would you rather be an average worker from a brilliant group or a brilliant worker from an average group?
Ooh,
Wow.
ooh, there's a lot there. And so what happens when you ask these questions from your experience in leadership? What are some of the benefits to opening up these kinds of conversations?
First of all, you invite everyone to talk. So if you ask that kind of question at the beginning of a staff meeting. The first way to use a Socratic card is every time you have a staff meeting, every time you have a group meeting, start off with asking a question. And again, I've got a bunch of questions here in Socratic cards, but you may have better questions than mine. Whatever your source is for the questions, start off with asking a big question. And in my opinion, the right questions have a couple of aspects. They're A/B questions. So you can come down on, who votes for one, who votes for two. And so that's a really important thing to add energy. They're non-coercive. There's not an easy answer to them. And then the third thing is they really do matter. They actually do. The issue of would you rather be great yourself or be from a great team is really important, because if you want to be great yourself, which is a valid option, you're going to spend as much time as you can making yourself great, which is awesome. But if you would rather be from a great team, if I'm applying for a new job in television, I'd love to be from The Simpsons. I want to be from a super successful show. If I'm banging on the door and want to work for a company, I'd love to be from the Apple Design Group. I don't care if I'm the weakest person in the Apple Design Group. I want to be from the Apple Design Group. So it's a whole different mentality. And if indeed you want to be from a great group, then you're going to actually spend a lot more time helping the people around you get better and then collectively become greater than you are if you're just thinking about, I want to make myself look as good as I can. So they all have really big implications in the real world.
You brought up a really powerful interview question. I want to delve in because talked about groups and teams. If you're a leader taking over and you get an opportunity to look to hire some team members, what recommendations would you give to that person to help them find the right people for their team?
So first, obviously, ask good questions. But I think a perspective to bring to bear is looking at every single person who knocks on the door, who you're sitting across from, and looking at the person and saying, that person is a hero on a journey. That person has a life journey. They may be done within a year, but there is something that person wants to make progress for and grow on. And they are going to be incredibly loyal to me. They're going to walk through burning coals for me if I can help them on their most important journey. And so you want to see them as a hero on a journey. You want to appeal to their heroic self. And then you ultimately want to structure the work itself as a heroic tribe. And so I just want to zoom out for 1 second, if I may. And in corporations today, and again, I work with a lot of corporations, most employees, about 70%, I would classify as easily replaceable employees. They're there and they're cogs in a machine. And the term first came to me when I was talking to a General Motors person in charge of HR at General Motors, no surprise, but said very, very specifically, I wanted, if someone gets sick, someone dies, gets hit by a bus, I can replace them in 2 days with someone who's going to fit right in, kind of thing. And so traditional education is aiming at building easily replaceable employees. But about 30% of most big corporations today are, I'm going to call them heroically organized. These are heroic tribes. These are people who matter. These people who are growing themselves considerably. The last thing we want is an easily replaceable employee to grow. We want to keep them where they are, in part because we can't pay them if they grow to their potential. We think it breaks the budgets. But if you're part of that 30% heroic tribes, then we want you to grow. We want you every day to be better than you were before. We want you to evolve. We want you to be self-managed. Heroic tribes are relatively self-managed, as is the top of the organization or great marketing teams or something. And then we also, relatively speaking, self-managed, high goals, and you have some control of evolving your work to match your passions. And so again, you wake up every day really excited to be there. So increasingly, you do want to think, if you are a young leader, am I hiring this person to be a hero, or am I hiring this person to be an easily replaceable employee? And if it's a hero, then it's an entirely different conversation.
Yeah. And then so let's talk about the replaceable employees for 1 second. Let's zoom in on them, because certainly getting them to buy in is important. Even if they are easily replaceable, while they're there, they still have to buy in. So you may not treat them like they're on the same hero journey, but how do you get, as a leader, those individuals to buy into your mission?
For me as a leader, I'm going to say that the goal that just because companies today treat heroic opportunities as a scarcity mentality, I do not. And in my opinion, I believe there's some people who just want to check in and check out, and God bless them, they're wonderful people and they do a great job. And if that's what they want out of work, power to them. And let's make sure they get out on time, and let's make sure the juice machine is filled and stuff. Let's take care of the people who want to treat work as a transactional activity. And again, awesome, do it and be loyal to them. But a lot of people walk into jobs and they realize that they are replaceable employees and they chafe at that. And so to some degree, if I'm a leader in that kind of role, then I'm going to try to turn the tables. I'm going to want to turn my easily replaceable employees into heroes themselves. And so that's one of the reasons for the Socratic Cards, is to subvert the organization, to take a group that's set up to fail or set up to be mediocre and have them find their heroic best and have them turn into people who are passionate about walking in the door and who are looking at every day as a chance to make themselves more powerful and to matter more.
Very powerful. Clark, I know you got some real ideas, and over our almost 5 years, we've interviewed leaders in all aspects, including I'm being an educator for over 3 decades myself. We've interviewed superintendents and principals, so leaders of schools. Tell us some thoughts on giving some advice on how we can make some changes that can enhance our educational process.
So right now, most of education is fairly cult-like in their belief in their tools. And I guess probably more guild than cult-like. Ultimately, I'll define a cult as an organization that turns you against the reason why you joined it. So a cult is, if you go in there because you really love the color blue, then the cult is going to make you hate the color blue and love the color green or whatever. So the mechanics of a cult is to turn you against the reason why you joined it. And again, I think most people go into education wanting to make a difference in people's lives and almost saying, oh, I'm never going to do all this stuff that was bad about education. And then 1 year in, they're being the people who are doing what's bad about education. So I think there's a mentality of workbooks, essays, lectures, and tests as just my own little shorthand way of thinking about it. Workbooks, essays, lectures, and tests that has turned into what we think of when we think about education. When we imagine people learning, we can imagine them sitting in a classroom and raising their hands if they're attentive and not raising their hands if they're bad. And the teacher has a question, and the question has a right and wrong answer. And hopefully, if you get it right, you get a gold star, and if you get it wrong, you get to go down to the brown room or something. But it's a very dehumanizing process, and I think people feel it. And so I think as long as we have a monoculture approach to education, in my mind, and I don't want to get political here, but I think one giant reason for a lot of the agita in the world today certainly in the United States today, is because there's one approach to education. And if you're aligned with that approach, yay, you win. And if you're not aligned with that approach, boo, you lose. And I think about it in these terms. So imagine two people. Imagine one person who is charismatic, who is charming, who's really good at motivating people, who's a bit of a class clown, loves talking to people and then doing cool projects. That's person one. And then person two is very studious, very introverted, loves reading books, has a great memory for facts, and really is a people pleaser and really wants to make the teacher happy. Which of those two people is school going to help the most?
Two.
And so there's nothing fair about that. The world needs both people, to be sure, but the thumb is on the scale of one kind of person. And so I think that is, and so our person number one here, the great charismatic leader, is going to be rightfully irked that they are not appreciated, that they're not able to reach their potential, and then pretty soon they're labeled as the troublemaker or the one who's there to get the bad grade to make the person who gets the good grade get even better, kind of thing. And so I think the diversity of approaches is incredibly important. So we don't have one way of teaching, but we increasingly have 3 or 4 or 5 different ways that all aren't just like good extracurricular activities, but are really kind of career boosting, career helping things.
Let me try my hand at asking you a Socratic question. Can I do that?
Please.
Now, I don't know if this counts as a Socratic question.
If it's a question, it definitely.
Thinking about education, would you rather a young leader, maybe of the more charismatic type, go to college and work on their degree, or would you rather them dive right into the field and get some working and leadership experience in the field?
So the fact that you're asking that question is a very good sign, because 10 years ago, we would have said, of course, everyone should go to college. And I think nothing has hurt the assumption of college like the assumption of college.
Mm.
So right now a lot of colleges are suffering, and to some degree rightfully they've pursued the wrong students for the wrong reasons, and we've had this lockstep system. And I think another part of that question is, should high schools should the linkage of high schools be to colleges primarily or to other kinds of activities? So right now, if you're in a high school, you're going to say SAT scores are great because that increases our linkage with the best schools. And lots of A's is great because that increases our linkage with colleges. But what if the linkage is with leadership roles in leadership organizations? What if they are apprenticeships? What if you make people do not make? What if you give the opportunity to do apprenticeships in high school that link to passions? The linkage is so incredibly strong where you have to fight the system if you don't want to go to college or don't want to go to college immediately. And the other nice thing, again, I think as we're breaking up the one golden path mentality, and we can also say things like, in my opinion, Google should have broken schools because most schools are there to replicate Google. But I think certainly LLMs and other forms of generative AI is putting the stake through the heart that Google only tried to do, which is to totally undermine the MacGuffin of schools, which was to write term papers and things. And I think most people would say that's not the real goal of schools, but it just happens to be the MacGuffin, the activity that we're pushing them to do in order to get them to do what we want them to do, learn the skills we want them to learn.
Very interesting. I got to ask you, because I know early in your career, and I got to share a quick little Xerox story, because I know you wrote speeches for some of the big leaders at Xerox, and Xerox was founded here in Rochester. I got to tell you a quick funny story, then I'll ask my question. I used to belong to this tennis club, and a guy who was supposed to play told me he couldn't play, but he got someone to play me, and so I didn't care. And I met him, and his name was Joe Wilson. And we had a nice match. And afterwards, he told me he's a financial advisor. We ended up becoming friends and playing. But the funny part is, one of my friends at the club saw me a couple days later and said, "Who were you playing?" I didn't recognize him. I said, "His name was Joe Wilson." He goes, "You know who Joe Wilson is?" I said, "He told me he's a financial advisor." He said, "His grandfather started Xerox." So that's something you're a little familiar with. But so
It's
my
an amazing
question
legacy.
is, because leaders of any type, whether you're young and emerging or a veteran leader, need to do presentations. What advice would you give a person on how to put together a powerful presentation to help them? Because they need to, and I don't want to get off on a huge tangent, but I always laughed when I would talk to a company, and if one of their leaders talked and they were really bad, like at one time the CEO, all he did was turn around and read his slides. I go, if I can't be better than that, I shouldn't be here. But so often I see leaders, some of them are very good presenters, but many are not. What advice would you give them?
Sure. So I was asked about 2 months ago now to guest lecture. I guest lecture a lot, and I've guest lectured at all the military universities and colleges. I've guest lectured at Harvard. I've guest lectured at a bunch. And so a friend asked me to guest lecture, talk about short sim design, so the development of short simulations. And so I gave them some pre-reading to do, or some pre-videos of me talking and that kind of thing. But I spent the entire class, an hour and a half, doing nothing but asking them questions about simulation design. Is a good educational simulation short or long? Does it get into is it intellectual or is it emotional? Is it realistic or is it not? And when researching an educational simulation, is the most important thing to find out the right way of doing something, or is the most important thing to find out all the wrong ways of doing something that happen in the real world? And so you can do nothing but I did nothing but ask questions of the group. And the first people were taken back because it's like, hey, wait a minute, we brought you in as the expert. Why aren't you experting us? But very quickly they got the hang of it and they were into it. They went from leaning back to leaning forward. And there are A/B questions. Hey, show of hands. Who here thinks A? Here thinks B? Okay, why did you choose that? And whatever. And it was an infinitely more energetic. It was infinitely more memorable. It was an infinitely more fun session that I think was a lot more effective. And also didn't betray the content. If you're teaching about interactivity and content, then lecturing at someone about how good interactivity to is seems pretty weak, pretty bad form. So I think asking questions of the audience and asking non-coercive questions where you really do want to know the answer. And it's amazing how much you can help people think deeply about things by asking good questions. Now there is some information that you may have to present, But I think people would be surprised at how well they can do by engaging the audience and having them vote on things and having them defend opinions and change their minds and stuff like that. And I've done a lot of leadership stuff as well. And there's nothing, again, as unsatisfying as talking to people or at people about leadership. If the entire premise of your presentation is we want people to, if you're a good leader, you want to be listening more than you're talking.
Yeah. And I found that in education too, teaching a college class and having no formal teaching training or whatever. I started by how do teachers teach? They talk at the students. Think about the Charlie Brown wah wah. That's how I was at first, and students quickly tuned out. So certainly I still have a long way to go in trying to get them engaged in everything, but I understand now that's the more important way to go. You also mentioned when it comes to education, I forget, we could have almost made it into an acronym, right? Was it tests, papers, lectures? What were the four things that you mentioned there?
Workbooks, essays, lectures, tests.
Okay, I kind of had it backwards, but workbooks, essays, lectures, and tests. And those four are like the bedrock of higher education institutions. I spent enough years going to higher education, and I definitely found that. So do you have some suggestions for educators?
Yeah, I got to say one thing. It can be an acronym. It's WELT.
WELT. There we go. There we go, Clark. WELT. Do you have some suggestions on some of the alternative ways to assess students, get them involved, and ultimately improve their education outcomes?
Sure. The reason for Socratic Cards is to present a little package, a little self-contained package of saying, here is one alternative. It's not the alternative, it's not the better way, but it is a different way. It's a fundamentally different way. So a Socratic card has three parts to it. And the top part is a fun question. It's a big high energy question, like we talked about. You really want people involved, leaning forward, and to get to a good future. Are you on the right path, or do you need to shake things up? That's a good question, and that's a scary. It's like looking for mushrooms in the woods. It's fun because it's scary. You answer the question wrong and you die. You start off with a fun question that engages them. Then the cards. So part two, like level one of the game, is just to ask questions. And again, you can treat it like Cards Against Humanity. You can treat it like Trivial Pursuit. You can simply ask good questions of friends at night over drinks. You can ask it at a staff meeting. You can ask it before a college professor can ask his or her students before every class session. Let's spend 5 minutes talking about this. But then the next part of the Socratic Cards process is some challenges. So it's not enough to just talk about or debate some kind of big question. So one challenge might be find 2 examples of world-class work for your next project and share them and use that as your framework. It's an activity. It implies that you're actually doing some work, which is more true of the work of the corporations perhaps. But here's an activity to do. Spend 2 weeks only using growth mindset praise. Don't ever praise what one has accomplished, praise the effort they're putting into it, for example. And so you can give yourself these real challenges. And then that's the other part of growth, is doing these challenges. In all cases, the challenges themselves help inform the big question up front. And so you can have this little hypothesis of saying, I wonder if, and then you can start playing out these experiments. And then the third part of Socratic Cards is people can work up a chain and say, I'm going to do some easy challenges first, like playing a computer game, and then do some harder challenges, and then do some harder challenges still. And then I'm going to become a mentor myself, and I'm going to look at other people's work and evaluate them. And so that little model, it's actually based a little bit on Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12-step process. But that little model is actually a really good one for learning and growing and actually transformation. And if you wanted to measure progress, if you're a person you want to measure progress, you can measure how many people went down this entire path and became mentors themselves, with the goal of getting other people to make progress on their journey. So I think it shows you, it's a very simple little package. It's a very self-contained little deck of cards, but it's like a pack of seeds. It allows you to experience a fundamentally different way of learning and growing that in a lot of ways is in fact better.
Clark, you brought up something that I'm trying to encourage people is to find mentors. You brought up mentors. What advice would you give to a young emerging leader to find a mentor that can help him or her?
Sure. So 2 things. The self-serving question is part of the value of Socratic Cards, is in a community creating a situation where people almost have to raise their hands and say, I will be a mentor. I will look over your work. And then you get practice in submitting your work of saying, hey, I accomplished this thing. Will you bless it? Will you give me credit for it? So it teaches people to ask for a mentor role for help. But then at the end of the mentor path in Socratic Cards, you actually become a mentor yourself. And now you're looking over other people's work. So part of the goal was to create a really pithy little self-contained world where everyone can get experience in asking for mentors and experience in being a mentor. So that's a very nice thing to do it. If you're in a corporate culture, you can have people raise their hands and raise your hands and say, all the senior leadership should say, I am happy to I'm happy to take on some responsibility in looking over other people. I think schools like Harvard do a very good job at assigning mentors to new graduates for that reason. And so I think you have to do it deliberately. But Socratic Cards, one of the values of Socratic Cards is to give people the experience of saying, I'm going to work towards becoming a mentor, and then the fun of being a mentor. Because I think the other thing that you're getting at, not only do people want mentors, but being a mentor yourself is incredible. And especially if you're stuck on your journey, if you actually don't know what to do next, one of the best ways of getting unstuck in your journey is helping someone else make progress on theirs.
Let's step away from leadership in the business and education world and talk about personal life for a minute, because I know there's so much overlap. And if you're a parent, you're a leader, and you may hold debatably one of the most important leadership positions in the world. So how can you use Socratic questioning in parenting, in personal relationships, and some of these other areas in our life that we don't often think of when we think of leadership?
Sure. So there's no question. Again, I want to build more Socratic decks, and the next Socratic deck I want to build is Socratic Cards for parents, because I think they really want it and need it. But I think very much asking questions. I think there's another concept of tribe building, which I think comes into here and saying, is your family a tribe or not? Is everyone aligned in its goals? Do we benefit from helping each other? Are we helping itself? And then there's and I can't remember the author, Jim, you'll probably remember this author, or John, but the 5 tribes, the bottom level, the lowest level tribe is basically the hoodlums, the vandals, the other people who say, oh, life sucks, everyone sucks, whatever. Go one step up. Tribe level 2 is basically are the complainers, the whiners, the, oh, poor me, or I just want this, why can't I have this? And it's that sort of mentality of really looking at everyone else is doing well but me, and life is stacked against me kind of thing. So that's sort of tribe level 2. Tribe level 3 is the MBA, hyper competitive, I win by being the best. If I get more money than everyone else, then I win. If I get a bigger house than everyone else, I win. If I get a faster car than anyone else, I win. And so that's the Wharton MBA mentality. But then you get to interesting like tribe level 4, where you say, I win if my tribe wins. I want to be a good coach. I want to bring people in. I want to engage people. The game worth playing is not against the other team. The game worth playing is optimizing my team to win, kind of thing. And so how do we really create this great tribe? And then the 5th level is basically everyone wins or no one wins. We all grow together. It's impossible to be in a situation where I can grow and you don't grow. That is almost nonsensical. So if I help you, then I necessarily help myself, and vice versa. In that highest level 2, then it's not enough to be part of one tribe. I want to be part of multiple tribes. It's almost the Tocqueville view of democracy in America. The reason America is strong is because people belong to multiple tribes, multiple non-overlapping tribes. So as you start thinking of your own family, then you can look at that 5-tribe model and say, where are we in that model? And it's pretty hard to build a tribe if you're at the 1 or 2 level. And so that almost involves individual work. If you have a child who's much more in the vandal mentality or the entitlement mentality, then you almost have to at least get them up individually to a level where they're super interested in becoming part of a tribe. Once you have them at level 3, the MBA, super competitive, I win, I don't care if you do, or I win by you losing. Once you get them to that mentality, then you can actually build a pretty meaty tribe.
I want to delve deeper in just either share some of your habits or people that you observe that you think have been effective leaders from a personal journey, because I always kid leaders that the first person you got to lead is yourself. So what have you found either just helped yourself or just your observation of people that you feel are effective leaders on their personal habits? Could you give us a couple of ideas on that?
I think it's not being the smartest person in the room is probably the biggest one. I think it's truly looking at how do I surround myself with people who are better than I am? And how do I bring out their best. So I think the good leaders, and again, I've worked for senior leaders and have been incredibly impressed with how much they've been interested in helping me grow. And they know that they grow by helping other people grow. And those CEOs who have helped me make real progress on my journey, I am infinitely loyal to. I will take a bullet for them. I will walk through fire for them. I can probably think of 10 people who have really committed themselves to me making progress and growing on my journeys. And it's just, I'm stunned by how passionately loyal I am to those people, and I will always be loyal to them. And so I think that is probably the biggest power trick. And then I think there's always the fact is that they are always asking questions. They are always challenging themselves. They're always putting up hypotheses and they're sharing them with other people. So conversations with them is not here's what to do, but I was thinking about this. What do you think? Is this possible or not? Is this a dumb idea or is this a good idea? Let's talk about it. I'm a highly imperfect leader myself, but I'm much better than I was for being around a lot of these people.
All good advice. Surround yourself with people smarter than yourself. Although, Clark, for you, that might be tricky. I don't know how you find people who are smarter than you, but it's so important for any leader.
Easier than it seems, but yes.
You have these decks of Socratic cards, which are really interesting. I want to talk about those, as well as where people can learn more about you and some of your brilliant insights. So talk about each of those, your Socratic cards in particular, the benefits of actually getting our hands physically on those, and then also where people can learn more about you.
Sure. So Socratic Cards, you can get them off the website, socraticcards.com. And again, a la Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the really important things about Alcoholics Anonymous is that it's pretty cheap to deploy. And so I really wanted to create a solution so a deck of cards is $25 and there's 2 decks for 50, including postage or something. That's a very cost-effective way and you can use you use your cards almost infinitely. They don't wear out or something unless you drop them or something. But it's a very incredibly inexpensive way to put someone on a growth ladder. And that was an important part of my own philosophy, is saying, how do we create something for which there is no excuse? Money is not an excuse not to move forward. There may be other excuses. It may be a stupid idea. It may be dorky. It may be not what I'm in the mood for right now. But money should not be a barrier, as opposed to going to a certain college or taking a course or something, where money can be an issue. And it's a really important part of it. And that's how you can get your hands on them yourself. And it was very important to me that I made them physical. Most of my other programs have been electronic. A lot of my simulations are almost always electronic, and I love technology passionately. However, for Socratic Cards, I wanted to make something that was physical, that was almost totemic. And so literally, if I look at you and say, John, man, oh man, you've got it going on. Here's something that you may find, it may work for you, it may not, but it may. Try this out. And by the way, I'm happy to be a mentor if you need someone to look over your work kind of stuff, and I can start the ball rolling. And so that handing over the lightsaber, handing over the magic seeds, handing over the magic wand, whatever, is a really important part of the mentor role, is giving someone physical, something totemic to put in their hands and say, here is a hero's journey. You may take the calling, you may not. You may put it in your sock drawer for 5 years, but 5 years later, it'll still be there. The technology won't be obsolete. And you can pull it out 5 years later and pull out a card and say, oh, actually, you know what? I could do this after all. I can do this now, or I couldn't do it before.
So, and I have one more question to close up, but you mentioned SocraticCards.com. If people want to reach out to you individually, what would be the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, Clark at SocraticCards.com is super duper easy. And my email is on the site. If you have any questions at all, you want to think about it. And I think Socratic Cards are probably 90% wonderful. And so I'm really curious how to make them better over the next 6 months, a year. I want to get rid of the bad cards and add new good cards, and then ultimately create more and more decks. So I think for me, it's a culmination of 30 years of working and thinking and talking to people and trying to figure out how to make education better and how to create a path by which people can actually grow. One more thing, if I may, and
sure.
All the challenges, I have level 1, level 2, level 3 challenges, easy, medium, and hard challenges. But the other part of the challenges is they're organized by different categories. And so there's some of the challenges are some around using time. How do I make it so that a month goes by and I'm better off than I was a month ago? Achieving excellence. How do I truly produce world-class work? Finding your calling. How do I understand this mess that's my brain? And the problem with having a calling is it makes us do really stupid things. It makes us irrational in a lot of ways. We don't do the right thing because our calling is begging at us to do something else. Mental models. How do we get little heuristics for understanding the world? reducing drama in our communities. How do we have a community that only has good drama, not bad drama? Building good habits. We talked about that before. And then increasing the energy. How do we have more fun? How do we arrive at work? Want to be there. This is like the cool place to be as opposed to something pretty drudgery. And so those are all a variety of approaches from super rigorous and super specific to a lot vaguer and a lot more open-ended. And so as you become a mentor, as you climb the path, it was really important to me to have lots of choices of people saying, right now I'm in the mood to be super concrete and super reductive. Other times I'm saying, I want to do something cooler and bigger and a little fluffier. And so you can become a leader on your own terms. And that was another, the optionalness. One cool thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is that you can sit in the room and not make any, and not do anything other than listen to other people talking. And you can wait as long as you want. They're not going to kick you out. They're not going to whatever. You can always go to meetings and sit and listen to other people telling their stories. And when you're ready, you can say, all right, you know what? Now I'm ready to move forward. And I think that was a really important part of Socratic Cards as well, of saying you can have these fun questions and you can talk about them and answer them, but you don't really have to commit to doing any of the challenges on the cards until you're ready, until you find one that says, yeah, that seems pretty easy and that seems pretty important. And that will move me ahead in something that matters to me. And so to me, that was just a really important part of the constructing what I think of as a perfect learning environment, is that optionality and that being able to customize it.
Yeah,
Well said.
that's leadership. That's leadership right there. It's not forceful coercion. It's actually inviting someone into a conversation, inviting someone into their own growth. And that's a lot of what you talked about today. So we really appreciate that.
John, I have one last question. I'm
Sure.
just curious, Clark, and thank you for your great insights. We really enjoyed this interview with you today. But I got to ask you this, because you've been in the leadership business and trying to help others for 3 decades now. Was there a really strong belief you had about what an effective leader looked like early in your career, and something now you've changed dramatically where you say, no, that's not correct. This is something I really believe in now?
How have I grown as a human being throughout this journey? I had a very good, probably the first person who was an exemplar to me, but he still is, was someone who ran a summer camp that I attended. And his name is Tim Ellis, and he ran Camp Chewonki, which is now the Chewonki Foundation around environmental education. But he really, in his case, believed his father was a headmaster at a prestigious New England prep school. He was a teacher at a prestigious New England prep school, and he went off and became a camp director because he thought he could develop, specifically boys, it was a boys camp. He could develop boys more in 2 months during the summer than he could 10 months or 9 months in a prestigious prep school, Boston suburb prep school. And so he went through he was lots of learning theory, lots of experiential learning and stuff. And so and really no grades, no tests, no whatever, but lots and lots of development challenges, lots of personality growth, development opportunities, lots of big challenges, whether it's hiking trips and canoeing trips and whatever, and believing that was the model to develop people. And so early on, that was a really big inspiration for me to rethink what education should be. But I have not changed. I've not grown. I've been fairly static. I'd love to say, man, I'm much smarter now than he ever was, but that's not true. I'm still in his shadow. I'm still standing on his shoulders in terms of what I've been doing. No, I haven't had an early model leadership that I've grown out of yet. So that probably speaks badly for me.
Okay.
Thank you again, Clark, for your time. It was really interesting hearing from you about Socratic cards, Socratic questioning, a lot of the different things that we can do as leaders too, and educators too. I certainly took some away too from my college class of going, stop talking at them, talk more with them. Thank you, Clark. I know you gave our audience some good insights today. And if you're enjoying the Limitless Leadership Lounge, would love it if you would leave us a review up on any of the podcast platforms that you're listening to. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on any of the content that we got. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we'd love it if you'd leave us a review there. It helps us reach other young and emerging leaders like yourself, and it also gives us feedback on what we can continue to improve and what kinds of guests that you'd like to hear from. Thank you for checking out the Limitless Leadership Lounge, and thank you, Clark, for your time again today.
Thank you so very much. A real honor and pleasure to be here.